Since this week's blog post is about metadata, I thought I'd share one of my most favorite metadata tips. And this is actually a Photoshop tip. I've worked in Photoshop for a number of years, but I learned this tip about 2.5 years ago, and it has totally changed the way I work. In Photoshop, under Preferences, so if you're on a Mac, that's going to be Command K. If you're on a PC, it'll be Control K. You'll pull up the general preferences. These also happen to live, they live under the Photoshop menu on a Mac or the Edit menu on a PC. Under the general preferences is an option. I already have mine reset. By default, this option is set like this. It's called the history log. If you check the history log box and choose metadata and then choose edit log items and detailed, this will include in the metadata of your document all of your Photoshop settings, steps, and the complete history of the file. It's a really cool tip. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. If you set this up without a document open, what happens is that becomes the default settings for Photoshop every time you use it, instead of just the default settings for that particular file. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what this does. I'm going to open up the image from my blog post this week. And this is a self-portrait that I took, just the shadow. I thought it was kind of a cool picture. So I'm going to go ahead and click open. This is a raw file, so Photoshop's going to bring up the camera raw dialog box, which you're only going to get to see part of because my recording window is kind of small. So I'm going to go ahead and just open this up. And to start, I'm going to go to File and File Info. This is where, by default, this is what the window looks like. The document title, the author, this is where you would set a copyright status to the file. On the left-hand side, one of the options is, this also, by the way, where your camera data is. So here's all my camera settings for my photo. And here's the Photoshop option. So this shows you already that I have opened today on the 9th of November this file. This is the file path where it lived. I opened it as a camera raw file. Here's all of my camera information. And any changes that I made, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and we'll come back and look at this in just a minute. So this image is okay. I wanted to play with it in black and white, so I'm going to use an adjustment layer and quick change it to black and white. I like to start with the neutral density setting, and I want to bring some of the yellows back in, some of the greens. Maybe pull the magentas out. Deepen the cyans as well. And we'll work with the green a little bit more. Maybe up the yellow just a hair. Okay, so there's something I'm pretty happy with. I'm going to go ahead and close that panel, and I'm going to save this file. I'm going to go File, Save As. I'll save it as a JPEG. And again, I get this great big box that's bigger than my recording window. And I'm going to go ahead and close. Actually, I didn't save that as a JPEG at all. Saved it as a Photoshop document. There it is. Change this right here to JPEG. Go ahead and save it. It's going to bring up the little dialog box where I can give it the options. And so now I'm going to do a couple things. I'm going to look at the file info for this Photoshop document, and I can see that here's when I opened it. It was opened as the camera raw file. I added an adjustment layer, made some changes, modified the adjustment layer, saved it as a Photoshop document, and then did a Save As to save it as a JPEG. The interesting thing is that notice all of my settings are maintained, and so that's really helpful because oftentimes I found that I'll look at information on a Photoshop document and I'll want to remember what I did. This gives me the ability to go back and look and say, oh yeah, that's how I set that, or what were my settings. Works with filters as well, works with colors that you select. Really handy feature. So I'm going to go ahead and close the Photoshop document and open up the JPEG file really quick. let's see, there's the JPEG file. And notice in the JPEG file, when we go look at that file info, that information remains intact in the JPEG file as well. So I hope that's a helpful little tip. Doesn't add to the file size drastically because it's text-based metadata, but can be a really helpful tool to have in your arsenal. Have a great day.